Welcome to this edition of the High Strangeness Factor, copyrighted on the Paranormal UK Radio Network. I'm your host, Steve Ward. On each episode of the High Strangeness Factor, we explore all aspects of the paranormal and the unexplained, from the distant past to the present, and we examine the parallels and patterns that lie hidden in what seem to be different aspects of the paranormal. Brandi, welcome back as my co-host, as my continuing occasional co-host.
Well, thank you so much for inviting me again.
And we've got a great guest today, and Reverend Michael J. Carter, who we'll introduce in a moment. But you and I were talking yesterday a little bit, and you were one of the ones that I think discovered ancient aliens early on. Did you discover it when it first came on?
I did. Actually, I discovered some recorded podcasts, if you will, of various speakers, and they were kind of referencing the ancient aliens type theory, only they weren't calling it that. And so when that show came out, it just kind of put everything I'd been hearing about together. And it was just like mind blowing to me. I was trying to tell everybody I knew all about it, and nobody was getting it. Nobody was getting it.
Well, I remember you saying that, but I also admitted to you that I was introduced to the ancient alien stuff a long time ago. But when that TV show came on, and I'm going to admit this to you and our guest, I was an ancient aliens snob. Yes, it was beneath me, and I carried over kind of an old attitude. Early on, Eric von Daniken was pretty viciously attacked, and I even remember it was an interview in an old Playboy magazine. Now, see, that was my problem. Most people don't read the interviews, right? But I did. I read the interviews, and they were actually. It was. I had read Chariots of the Gods and thought it was interesting, and then there was this wave of criticism, and I took in some of that criticism. But interestingly, if you look at the more recent edition of Chariots of the Gods, he wrote a long introduction talking about how he made some mistakes early on, and he kind of jumped to some conclusions. But the important thing, I think, with Chariots of the Gods is that he says, look, I put a question mark at the end. This was what if, this was speculation. So these days, not only have I become a fan of ancient aliens, I have all the DVDs that are available. And I really appreciate Eric von Daniken as a survivor, somebody that weathered all this. And he's kind of a cult hero, or I don't know if that's the proper term or not. But
right.
Look at all the books that he has out there.
That's
and
right.
These sort of empire. If nothing else, he certainly created a wave of thinking, a line of speculation that people can look at and decide for themselves.
That's right. And he's still riding the wave. It's still relevant.
Yes, absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, now, with no further ado, Reverend Michael J. Carter is originally from Baltimore, Maryland. He moved to New York City in 1980. And lived there for 27 years, working as a professional actor before moving to Asheville with his family. Michael is an ordained interfaith minister and received his BA degree in letters from the College of New Rochelle, where he graduated cum laude. He received his Master's of Divinity degree from Union Theological Seminary in New York City, class of 2000. While serving various Unitarian Universalist congregations in New York, Michael was trained as an anti-racism trainer and has been recognized by President Clinton for his efforts. Reverend Carter now serves as the minister for the Unitarian Universalist congregation of the Shenandoah Valley in the beautiful mountains of western North Carolina. Reverend Carter has written articles on UFOs and religion for such publications as UFO Magazine, Alien Encounters, a British publication, the MUFON UFO Journal, Contact Forum, the Space Newsletter, that's support program for abductees' contact encounters, which is a UFO support group in New York City. He has spoken at UFO conferences such as the Edgar Cayce ARE Ancient Mysteries Conference, the annual Long Island UFO Conference with the late Bud Hopkins, Contact in the Desert, and the International UFO Conference in Scottsdale, Arizona. Reverend Carter has appeared on radio and TV outlets across the nation, and also on Japanese television discussing the Bible and UFOs. A longtime UFO experiencer, he lectures extensively on the topic of religion, spirituality, and UFOs. He has appeared on the Sci-Fi Channel's Steven Spielberg's production of Abduction Diaries, The Real 4400, and was a frequent guest on the History Channel's production of Ancient Aliens, and UFOs, The Hidden Evidence, which currently airs on the Travel Channel. He has also been interviewed by Academy Award-winning actress Shirley MacLaine, George Norrie's Coast to Coast AM, Beyond Belief on Gaia TV with George Norrie, and Late Night in the Desert with Heather Wade. Reverend Carter has also spoken to the Alabama and the Phoenix MUFON chapters about science, UFOs, and religion. He was a guest speaker at the Visions of the Future conference in Laughlin, Nevada. Reverend Carter's books are entitled Alien Scriptures, Extraterrestrials in the Holy Bible, A New World If You Can Take It, God, Extraterrestrials, and the Evolution of Human Consciousness, God Consciousness, a 30-day meditation manual to God-centered thinking. And his latest work is The Metaphysics of Spiritual Healing and the Power of Affirmative Prayer. All of Reverend Carter's books can be found at Amazon.com and Barnes & Noble. Michael, welcome to the High Strangeness Factor. Thank you so much for being here.
It's great to be here.
So there's so much we can cover. Of course, we will talk about the ancient aliens aspect, but there's so much more to you. And I just wondered if you could just give us an idea, and I know it could be, we could do a separate show on this, but how did you get where you are now? I mean, you started out at one point. You did some acting at one
Yes.
point. You had I'm sure there were certain turning points in your life, certain epiphanies that brought you. We all have a story to tell. So how did you get where you are now?
Oh, wow. Well,
I know.
That's
Easy
a great
question.
No, okay. When I was very young, I knew that I wanted to be a priest or a minister. I knew that. I loved religion. And then as I got older, it just came to be I knew I was going to be doing something in front of crowds of people. But I was raised in the Baptist tradition. And the Bible was a big deal. My parents are very religious people. And I knew I was going to be doing something like that. Now, how do I know? I don't know, but I did know. And then as I got older, I was just drawn into religion, to comparative religion, all the things that made that was similar. I mean, we know the differences, but I wanted to kind of explore the through lines because I thought it would help be a bridge to understanding other perspectives on how people view their inner lives. I got bitten by the acting bug in college, and I moved to New York, and I got my 15 minutes of fame. I get a pension when I'm 65, which will be in about 2 years, but I wasn't happy. I wanted to serve, so I decided to go to seminary. And what I did was I just transferred those skills that I learned as an actor, to communicate to people. Most of my work was done in soap operas, stage. I did a lot of stage, but I made a living by doing that. And they just transfer it over. And so that's where I got to be where I was or where I am today. It's the truncated version. I had some experiences with off-world intelligences. When I was an actor in New York, I was really into the sex, drugs, and rock and roll part of my life. And when I started having these experiences, they kind of, I wasn't told what to do, but I got the message that this is not all you can be. And so it kind of got me, it was a splash of cold water in my face, if you will, for lack of a better explanation. And so I started with religion and spirituality. Getting into the UFO community was very difficult in the sense of not that I was trying to get in, but it took me a while to, how can I say, to come to grips. I mean, it rocked my world. I was having experiences with beings that from not from this earth, and how do I incorporate that in my daily life? But also, it changed the way I looked at Christianity because I considered myself a Christian at that time. And so it was a journey, and it has been a journey. And one day I was asked to speak at a conference, and they wanted a bio, and I started listing the things I had done up to that point because I never intended to do this. It wasn't something that I consciously chose. And I knew people at the time in New York. They wanted to get rich. They wanted to be a celebrity. It was almost like being in the theater through the UFO community. But I never really got into that. But one day I read my bio and I was like, oh my God, this is like almost a second career. And so that's how I got to where I am today.
So suffice to say that these experiences, from you would say off-world intelligences, this is what when you were the path you were on. This is what changed it. It was something from sort of outside.
It was. That's a great way to put it. I think, but I think it was both. I was not happy being an actor because, at first I thought I was going to be Denzel Washington or someone, but I didn't. But I wasn't happy. And when I got shows, when I got cast in shows, my friends were happier than I was because it's the constant grind. It's the only business I know where there's at least a 98% unemployment rate all the time because you're constantly looking for work. I mean, even big stars have to audition. And I would get a show and it'd be great, but I knew as soon as that show closed, I'd be looking for work again. And so it then got to me that, I wanted to serve. I had I decided to leave the theater, and shortly thereafter, I started exploring metaphysics and spiritualist churches, and tarot cards and psychic phenomenon, and more liberal forms of Christianity, that kind of thing. And then I started having the experiences. I guess when the student is ready, the teacher will come. Only some people say now when the student is ready, the teacher disappears. But whatever, however way you want to put it, and that got me on this path. But even then, there were things because I had to incorporate this into my daily life. Yes, at one time before I became a parent, those experiences were the greatest thing that ever happened to me up until that time. But then, I realized, okay, the next day, outside of going to a psychiatrist because I thought I was losing it, I still have to get up and go to work. I still have to pay my rent. So it was like, oh, how am I going to treat people now that I've had these experiences? That became the question for me. How am I going to live my life now?
And can we assume?
And so
Go
now
ahead.
that's what I talk about when I go to these conferences.
And I guess we can assume that these experiences were positive experiences. I mean, we hear all kinds of contact
Yes.
stories from entities and so forth. Some are very negative, some are very
Yes.
positive.
Yes.
I talked to a lady named Marina Rose at the Exeter UFO weekend last September, and she had a very positive experience. It just was life changing, and there was nothing negative about it. Others we hear these, well, sometimes horror stories. So
Yes.
your experiences were, could we call them even spiritual,
They
uplifting?
were. Yes,
Okay.
that's the word. That's the word I would use. And I want to be clear because I know some people have it depends on how you're defining it. Some people think it's woo woo, but I'm defining spiritual as the cultivation of my inner life. And so that's what happened. Now, my experiences were positive, even though they were frightening. That was the thing. Mostly frightening because of the bizarre way in which they happened. I mean, I'm in my room and then I could turn around and then there's a being in my room. Sometimes the beings were really bizarre looking, like some reptilian people that I met who were not evil, by the way. They get a bad rap. We kind of stereotype things and we do that sometimes with some of these species. But what they did was they accelerated my spiritual growth. That's the best way I can look at it. And so some of them were frightening, but what it taught me was where else, because I came to a point where I was like, Michael, outside of the bizarreness of these encounters, no one's hurt you. Not really. I mean, I did have one incident where I was hurt, but I'm sure it was inadvertent. Um, but, and then I started looking at where else in my life do I let fear get the upper hand? And that, of course, is part of spiritual growth, right? If you subscribe to the notion that there are two emotions, there's love or fear. And so, I was never told explicitly you should do this. Sometimes hinted, sometimes gently, pushed in a way. But I always had my free will. But it really opened me up. And how can I say? I was more willing to be wrong, to admit when I was wrong. I was much more in touch with my feelings. I felt. Um, I was more willing to say I was sorry. I just looked at life in a pretty much more expanded view, willing to listen to others more, to look at my own stuff. Now, I'm not saying that I wasn't working on that before. I'm not saying that because cultivating your inner life, it's hard work, but they kind of expedited it, and so I will always be grateful for that.
Brandi and I were talking off air before you came on about in looking at your books. You define terms often because, especially in what we call religious or spiritual terms, because
Hmm.
there are people that come from a very fundamentalist background sometimes, and then there are others that
Yes.
come from more of a, well, that the term New Age isn't always appropriate, but you know what I mean.
Yes.
Uh, so there's very different backgrounds, and sometimes using the same terms, but meaning them very differently. So that's something that's very beneficial in your books, is the way that you define your terms.
Yeah, because I think Khalil Gibran says that much of what is said and not meant, and much of what is meant and not said, in between those two things, much love is lost. And I do want, I don't look at love as some sentiment feeling, but I think that's what we're here to cultivate. And it may take lifetimes to do that. But for instance, my more conservative friends, when they say God, I know what they mean, not only because I grew up as a Baptist, and I also know if I use the word, and I use various words, words get in the way, but words are all we have. But I just want to be clear that when someone says God, that I'm hearing what they're saying. Because when I use the word God, and I use it sometimes and sometimes I don't in my sermons and what have you, I want them to be clear of what I'm saying as well. That way we can kind of understand one another.
And
And
so,
oh yes, go ahead, Brandi.
sorry. So I just wanted to know if you could elaborate then, just for the who's listening as we go on through the interview, what is your definition of God then? Or when you speak of that in your interview here, what is it that you mean?
Well, if I use the word, Brandy, it's probably, I look at as
I
an,
think we, Michael.
yeah, can you hear me?
Oh, okay. Yes. Now we
Okay,
lost
yeah.
you for just a
I,
second. Okay.
I I'm sorry, Brandy. Steve. No, I look at it. I don't look. Put it like this. I want to be clear. I look at this energy, as an intelligence, and I think that when we can get hung up on words, but we need words. So I may refer to God as, I may use the word God, I may use divine mind, I may use the universe or multiverse, all that is. I don't, for people who are not, for people who don't mind the different language, the different usage of the verbiage, it's okay. But then I know if I'm speaking to someone coming from, God is the word they want to use. For instance, I have one of my sisters that is evangelical. And so we are at different ends of the spectrum. But when she says the word God, at least I know that's what her reference point is. For me, God is unknowable. And I think that's part of the problem, that sometimes we think we know God, but this is beyond what we can describe. And so I always bear that in mind. But for me, it's not an anthropomorphic man or woman up in the sky. It's an energy, it's an intelligence that is all pervasive. So that's what I'm talking. I'm very clear that I am not separate from this intelligence. But I was taught for many, many years that I was separate, that I was not worthy. Someone had to die for me to be worthy because I was a worm, I was sinful, I was all that. And now I had to unlearn that and know that I'm part of this all that is.
It's a
And so
pretty
that's what
heavy.
I'm talking about.
It's a pretty heavy burden to think that we're all born as miserable sinners and have to somehow
It's
climb out
tough.
of that.
Yeah, it was tough. It was tough. But I respect that with other people. I want to be clear, but it just doesn't work for me anymore on the path that I'm on. But I am very clear that I'm not talking about another human being or an anthropomorphic deity up in the sky.
Okay.
And if you and when you're talking about something, the sort of the opposite of anthropomorphic, it gets rid of the separateness that people feel sometimes with God or that power.
It does, but it can be very abstract. It's like, well, I'm a Reiki practitioner. Now, if I said I was a massage therapist or I was a reflexologist or something like that, it's kinesthetic, it's touchy-feely. Uh, but when I start talking about moving energy, which is something that you don't really see, but you can, you know what I mean? It's like, well, what does that really mean?
Uh, are you familiar at all with what they used to call the New Thought movement, late
I used to attend
1800s?
those churches, yes.
Oh, okay. Unity, divine
Unity,
science.
religious science. I remember Raymond Charles Barker and, Mary Baker Eddy. Oh, no,
Oh,
that's a little too old for me. But yeah, I'm very familiar with the philosophy. And I used to attend those churches when I lived in New York.
well, I find that whole area. I've got a mini library on the New Thought movement. All those,
Mhm.
and it's such a fascinating time because in the late 1800s you had Theosophy, the Spiritualist movement kicked in, the Fox sisters, and yet you
Yes,
had these interesting people. You had, I think the thing that kind of started it was, although these ideas have been around forever, was Mary Baker Eddy, who was an
Mary
invalid
Baker
at
Eddy,
the
that's
time.
correct.
She went to Phineas Parkhurst Quimby, who was a healer at the time.
Yes,
I think they called it mesmerism at the time.
that's
They
right,
used
the
archaic
hypnosis.
terms, right? And then from all it's fascinating because you have all these great names as Emma Curtis Hopkins and Charles and Myrtle Fillmore of the Unity School in Christianity. But the reason I'm bringing it up is it seems to have filtered all the way up to the present. I mean, even Norman Vincent Peale was influenced by some of these individuals. And if
Oh,
you
yes.
listen to people like Dr. Wayne Dyer, I mean, it just all has kind of filtered in, and into your books. It seems like there's this sort of unity in some of the terms and some of the thinking.
Definitely influenced by all of those people that you named, and I still practice. I use some of those principles in my life, which is why how I got to God consciousness. But yeah. I mean, to me, that was a little more. It hit home for me because I wasn't a victim. I did have some agency over my life if I changed the way I looked at life. And you see it through Course in Miracles or A Course of Love. I mean, the adage, you don't have to change the world, change your mind about the world.
And even sort of filtered into Napoleon Hill. He talked
Yes,
about how thoughts are things, and goal
that's right.
setting isn't something that's separate from God or spirituality. It's part of it. I
Exactly.
remember attending a Unity church for a while in the Detroit area. A great minister named Jack Boland taught these principles, and he was so far away from a very Bible thumping or fundamentalist proposition, and he was just a very, very charismatic and interesting character. So that's very interesting. And he even Boland, he had been an alcoholic at one time,
Mhm.
and he talked about his transition. And one of the things that happened was he heard Norman Vincent Peale on the radio briefly, and that was one of those things in the wheel that brought him forward to where he became a well-respected minister. And then I remember going to his church one Wednesday night, and he had Norman Vincent Peale there as his guest. And he was thanking him for that inspiration that he received actually decades before that helped set him
Wow.
on his path. So
Wow.
that was very, very cool. So yes, this is this is an area that I've always been fascinated by, and not just the last point is that I think it was Charles and Myrtle Fillmore that developed the Unity School of Christianity. They felt there was this, what they called it, I think, a metaphysical cord that ran through all religions. They weren't exclusive at all with any form of thinking. They thought that there were elements in all religions that kind of bound them together and represented that spirituality.
I think that's true, but most of the time, the people who were, at least from my studies, I don't want to make a blanket statement, but most of those people wound up being called the mystics, and so they were always at odds to a greater or lesser degree with the more orthodox branches of their, like the Sufis were with Islam. Do you know what I mean?
Oh, yes.
That's the more mystical tradition of Islam. You have Christian mysticism that sometimes is very much at odds with Orthodox Christianity. So, but those threads are there and very powerful.
Brandi, by the way, take over anytime you want. I know you've only got I don't know, 50 questions just on the tip of your tongue.
Well, based on what the two of you were just speaking about, I wonder, Michael, if you could maybe talk about how some of the thought of some of that kind of movement, the people of the positive thinking, applies to your works, the law of cause and effect, or
yeah, great question. I give an example. When I wrote the book, The Metaphysics of Spiritual Healing and Affirmative Prayer, and I'm sure you've heard this in some form or another, but we look at some of the teachings of Jesus. For instance, we look at the Sermon on the Mount. Obviously, one of the great tools of prayer is gratitude, and so I look at the Sermon on the Mount, and I notice that, and this is not new, that when Jesus, if you believe the story or not, it's another issue. But before he feeds the 5,000, he's thankful already. He's thanking the universe or his Father ahead of time. It's like, I know this is going to happen. This is done. Okay, and it changed my life because I was so used to praying to God like a Santa Claus. Dear God, can I please have this? Dear God, may I please have that? Dear God, and now I just say I affirm what I have. I'm thankful for what I have, especially now during this time of this pestilence, this virus that's keeping us where we are for right now, and it gives. I'm grateful for what I already have. And I find that when I'm thankful, I get more. I get more.
It's a very different way of thinking rather than, like you say, asking and begging, recognizing that because of that connection that we already have, that it's already will be made manifest.
like the law of attraction.
Yes, and because I'm not praying to something outside of me. I know that I'm part of it. It's like when a wave realizes that it's part of the ocean. The illusion is that I'm separate, but I'm not separate. And the same spirit that dwells in the trees and the ocean and the planet dwells in me as well. And so that's just one example. But I see it. I used to feed the homeless. Now, because of the virus, we've closed it down, the shelter. But I noticed that and I've been doing this for a couple of years, but I noticed when I started feeding the hungry. Now I have a job. It's not the highest paying job, but I have a job. I live a good life. I have a privileged life in some ways, but I was never out of food. People would give me food, or after we fed the homeless, what was left over we could take. And I started noticing that my refrigerator was always full. And I was like, how is this happening? And then it dawned on me, I was giving people food. If you want more love, give more love. If you want more forgiveness, be more forgiving. Do you see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And so what I put out came back to me. And that's not personal. That's just a law. That's just the law.
I think that my understanding of these traditions is that they look at these things as sort of an underlying principle, and like you say, law that is it's just as solid as the law of gravity or anything that we deal with in our daily lives, and
Hmm.
uh, and it's very different from the way that we're usually taught, and I think you point out differences between. The Old Testament and the New Testament. And some of the in the Old Testament, obviously, they looked at that kind of an anthropomorphic God, and in the New Testament, the Jesus gives us, I think this is my personal opinion, gives us
Sure.
more of an enlightened view of God. Even the hairs on your head are numbered, and he just paints this whole different view of God. What is your view of the Old and New Testament?
Well, you touched on a lot of things in those few words. I I feel that the Old Testament God was an extraterrestrial, and I look at Yahweh as an extraterrestrial. There were many gods, which I would say were maybe many star people, but Yahweh was a vengeful God. And he had temper tantrums, and he would kill men, women, and children, and he was very tribal. Um, and so, even when we look at the Ten Commandments, we have to be to realize that those commandments were only for the Jewish people. You could not covet your neighbor's wife. You did not kill your neighbor. You did not steal from your neighbor. Those were how Jews were supposed to deal with other Jewish people. They just became a nation, because if they were universal, they wouldn't have gone into the land of Canaan and taken the land. So that's how I look at it from that perspective. Not saying it's not. I mean, the beautiful, beautiful stories and what have you. But I think that Old Testament God left a little bit to be desired. It was hard for me when I started looking differently to look at Yahweh as someone I want to associate with. When we get to the New Testament, we could argue, even though Jesus was Jewish, but he was a different kind of Jew, obviously. But we could argue that Jesus is talking about a different God than Yahweh. This is someone who he's calling Father. This is someone who he's, and you have to say, look, if my mother's human and my father isn't, then I'm not human. Jesus may not have been fully human, but that's for another time. However, he was talking about love. So he was getting away from the 8th century Jewish prophets who, an eye for an eye and that kind of thing. He was saying, no, we're gonna flip Judaism a little bit. I want you to bring your A game, and that means loving your enemies. That means loving the Romans who occupy you. That means loving the tax collectors and the people who are taking advantage of you. That you are children of a God, a Father who loves you. So I'm thinking on one level, they may be two different gods we're talking about, or two different extraterrestrial races that we're talking about. Now, if we take the ET perspective out of it, the Old Testament is a very powerful book. It's a lot. They talk a lot about justice. Dr. King used the book of Amos and Micah and Isaiah to make America be true to what it said it was about. I mean, there's a lot of powerful stuff in that book. So it's powerful on many levels. But before Jesus comes along, it's not you take my eye, I take yours. It's walk the extra mile. If someone takes your coat, give them your shirt also. That kind of thing.
Before we get more into the ET aspect, another thing that Brandi and I were talking about before we brought you on the air, in a new world, if you can handle
If
it,
you can take it, yes.
if you can take it. Well, I got the right idea. Uh, Early on, and this kind of goes back to some of the things we were talking about. The word I don't know if I'm pronouncing it correctly. Sankofa.
Oh, yes, you are. Yes,
Okay.
Sankofa. Yes, that is an African word which and you're right. Yeah, it means that it's from the Ghanaian language of Akan, and it literally translated. It means it is not taboo to go back and fetch what you forgot. In other words, Sankofa means that we must go back to reclaim our past. So it's looking at the past and taking that wisdom and garnering that so you can go forward. It's not living in the past. The symbol is the bird looking back. It's emphasizes the bird is advancing,
Oh.
but you can look back and glean some wisdom. Who was it? The Christian philosopher Kierkegaard says life is lived forward, but it's only understood backwards.
Sort of, it goes a little bit along with Paul talking about putting off the old man and putting on the new man, I think.
Yes.
And
Or the old adage, what's the hindsight is 2020.
right.
If I knew what I knew now. But a lot of people don't want to look back. But sometimes you look back in order to be able to move forward.
And the Greek words, I think it's metanoia, which is what repent. I'm sure you know better than anyone. When you would translate these documents, we lose so much sometimes in the translation.
Oh, we definitely do.
And sinner repent, what I understand is repent came from the Greek words metanoia, which just means to change your thinking, to sort of raise your sights. Sin came from the term in archery, which meant to miss the mark.
That's right.
So rather than this heavy sinner repent, laying the guilt on you, you're just a miserable sinner, you're not worthy. It's more like, hey, you made a mistake. You change your thinking. You look at your past. You change it. You move forward, and you raise your sights higher.
That's right. That's exactly what it means, and it's come a long way. I mean, it's like Paul when he says, be not conformed to this world, but be you transformed by the renewing of your mind. And that is what consciousness is. It's changing the way one thinks. To me, consciousness is just a fancy word for awareness. So the more aware one becomes, the more awake, if we talk about what the Buddha talks about, the more knowledge and wisdom, and you respond to situations as opposed to reacting to them, that kind of thing.
And I want to remind everyone that you are listening to The High Strangeness Factor, copyrighted on the Paranormal UK Radio Network. I am Steve Ward, and today Brandi and I are talking with Reverend Michael J. Carter. And Brandi, I know you've got a million more questions. Did you want to get into some of the ET stuff, or where did you like to go? Because I know you've got notes all over the place.
I wonder if, because you brought up the New World, if you can take a book. I did have a question about the title there. And was that your title? Did you come up with that? And if so, or even if not, I guess, what New World are you talking about? And who is it that can't take it?
Well, I took, it's interesting. Whitley has a new book out now. Whitley Strieber, who's been very generous about praising my work, has a new book out called A New World. In the day after Roswell, what I'm talking about, the title of the book is taken from a statement that a star visitor gave to Colonel Philip Corso, who wrote the book The Day After Roswell. He had a face-to-face encounter with what he termed as an extraterrestrial biological entity, an EB, when he was stationed at New Mexico's White Sands Missile Range in 1957. And he says in his manuscript entitled Dawn of a New Age that one day he noticed a humanoid figure while near an abandoned gold mine in the desert, a short distance from the military base. The visitor telepathically asked the colonel if he would give the visitor a 10-minute head start to get back to his ship and to take off. Corso says that he mentally replied that 10 minutes could be an eternity. What do you have to offer? The visitor replied, a new world, if you can take it.
Oh.
So I wonder if the ETs are accepting royalties from you for that title, Michael.
Well, I should have asked permission, but I didn't.
They're probably good with it.
I mean, Colonel Corso was gone, so. But it's interesting because, like I said, Whitley Strieber's new book is called A New World. I read it several weeks ago.
Okay.
Yes.
Go ahead, Brandi, if you'd like.
Um, well, I guess within this, are you kind of referencing maybe star people in scriptures and kind of combining that with the law of one, or the, as we spoke of before, the consciousness of awareness? Does it all come kind of full circle?
It's a great question. What I've done, my first two books, Veronica, Brandi, were about the Bible and UFOs and philosophy. Those are I love those topics. I was getting pigeonholed as the UFO minister.
Okay.
And I wanted to write something different so people could see that it was more than just that. And I think they're all related, but that's when I wrote God Consciousness, and lastly, the book on metaphysics and spiritual healing. They all blend into the fact that this change in consciousness that I had, I was working towards it, but it really took off after my encounters. And I wanted to give people tools, but there's nothing new under the sun. Nothing I've written in those two books is new. That's why I'm not a big fan of the term New Age, but it's out there. I think it's ancient wisdom being rediscovered. But it's one thing to say that life can be beautiful or life is beautiful and that kind of thing. But I want to give people some tools on how to maybe access some of that. And there's nothing new. To me, it's just good to have a prayer life or a meditation practice to kind of ground one. I mean, these are, being in nature. I mean, these things are not new, but I think we don't really hear them, and we think maybe to deepen our spirituality we have to do something special or be something special. But you can access this stuff every day because it's all part of you. I'll tell you this: when I do the TV stuff is different because because it is. I don't have time or hour or two to talk except when I go to conferences. But when I first started this, I was getting, I don't what you can call it notoriety or celebrity because I was the only minister really talking about this, and I am an experiencer. But then I started talking about the spirituality because, so what? I've seen a star person on several occasions. I'm not trying to be self-deprecating, but I still have to get up tomorrow and go to work. I still have to lead my life. And so the point is, what kind of person are you going to be now that you've had these experiences? It reminds me of my friends who fought in Vietnam. Some of those who were lucky enough to come back, they would say when they had a month or they were almost at the end of their tour, they would go, how are you going to act when you get back in the world? The world being their civilian life. How are you going to act now? And it resonated with me because they were saying after you've seen the things that you've seen, maybe after you've done some of the things you've done, how are you going to behave now when you get back home? And so to me, for people who've had these experiences, and that's more difficult if they've not been as happy as some of them people have said they are, that's going to be the test. Because otherwise, I'm just, okay, you saw some people. So what? So what? But for me, it's now what lessons have I learned that I can help raise the vibration of the planet, that I can help my interpersonal relationships be a little more healthy, a little more healing. That's what I'm about. And when I talk about this, you can hear a pin drop. Yes, the first hour of my talk, I talk about the Bible and UFOs and whether I think Jesus was an extraterrestrial and the pillar of cloud by day and pillar of fire. I talk about all that sensational stuff, and I'm not trying to knock it. But people are really hungry about, okay, how can I apply some of this stuff to my daily life so I can live better, so I can be a more whole, loving, forgiving, authentic person? And I've been doing that for the last year and a half, 2 years. And when I do that, the response is awesome. It's wonderful.
Would you say then that basically in combining kind of the two sides of your studies, the extraterrestrials and scriptures and the metaphysical side, that you're kind of allowing people to realize that we're maybe greater than we think we are, and maybe we're part of something bigger than we can even imagine, and it's always been here and it's still here?
That's exactly it. Because I know people who are very spiritually advanced, at least to me, very evolved, and they've never seen an extraterrestrial. So you don't have to see an extraterrestrial to do this. You know what I mean? I mean, that's the way it happened with me. But you don't have to do that. It's just living your life. Maybe meditating could do it. Maybe your prayer life does it. Maybe you've had a near-death experience, or maybe a loved one died, or a divorce. There are a lot of ways you can get slapped in the face to make you wake up. And sometimes people just have it. They don't have to go through any hardship or what have you. And so, but you took the words, and they're just wonderful, that we are more powerful than we think we are, that our basic makeup is love, it's kindness. Yes, we're wounded. Some people more wounded than others. And we're here to learn to accept one another and to get past the illusion that just because I'm brown and you're not, or my hair is this way and yours isn't, or lips are thicker, or nose, whatever it is, I'm rich or poor, or you sleep with men and I sleep with women, whatever it is, that all that stuff gets in the way of who and what we really are. And we need to get past it. If not, we're going to destroy ourselves.
I wonder if you can provide an example, maybe from scripture, of that. The one I'm thinking of, and forgive me because I'm going to misquote it, is when Jesus said something like, "As I do these things, so shall you do them in greater," or something like that.
Yeah, that's perfect. Oh, yeah.
Is there another example of this in scripture where this comes out?
The whole book is about that. The whole book. I'm thinking specifically of the New Testament, but even if you look at the Dhammapada in Buddhism, the whole religion is to tell us to transcend. Right? We can transcend. The way humankind has interpreted religion is not the most healthy way, but any story in there, whether they're talking about forgiveness, or when Jesus goes to heal the man beside the pool, and he can't get in the pool because everybody runs by him. I think it's in John, and Jesus, it says, get up and walk. You can do. You're bigger than this. You're bigger than this. Or when he goes to heal a guy, but first he asks the guy, do you want to be healed? Do you want to be healed? Always telling you're more than you think you are. You are worthy. That's all Scripture is about in the New Testament anyway, or even in the Dhammapada, or that you are here to learn, to love, to grow, to see past personalities. When you look at the story of the woman at the well, the woman caught in adultery. Okay, remember, Jesus doesn't condemn her. He just says, go and don't do it anymore. Don't do it anymore. Because he knows that judgment is not the answer.
It's interesting when he said that, and greater things will ye do. That's pretty astounding. Greater things than he did. It suggests that perhaps he was an example and not an exception.
Well, that you couldn't have said it any better. And that's why I'm more of a Unitarian Universalist, because we look at Jesus not as God, but as the example of how to live a committed life. That any God that's in Jesus is also in you and me.
Well, I have to ask, was Jesus an ET?
I think it's very possible. Like I said, if we take it literally, this man's mother is human and his father isn't. Joseph is his earthly father. And we also know that Jesus had brothers and sisters. So maybe Mary had sex the old-fashioned way. We don't know. I'm assuming she did. But if we look at the story of the Christmas story of Jesus' birth, and we juxtapose it with stories in literature now about women getting pregnant, not making love and wind up pregnant, or they have a dream one night of an ET who comes and takes the baby away. They wake up the next morning and they don't have the baby. It's certainly possible, especially when we look at, as we were in the beginning, the etymology of words. A virgin in Hebrew is alba, A-L-B-A, right? And that just means young girl. It doesn't mean a woman who's had her hymen broken. Saint Jerome, we can thank for that when they were arguing about could Jesus have been born or come from someone making love. I mean, a lot of these guys who wrote some of who translated the Bible, they had never been with women. They were monks. They were priests. They were afraid of women.
Aren't we all to a degree? Sorry, forgive me for that.
I'm not going to say anything, Steve.
That was uncalled for. I do have kind of a serious question.
Yeah.
Now, with people that have had these experiences, your experiences with ETs or the others amongst us, as they're called sometimes, has been positive. What would you say to somebody? How would you guide somebody that feels like they've had a very negative experience with an ET?
That is a serious question. I do this. I take people at their word. Like I said, mine weren't just all, sweetness and light, but I had to look over them after a while. I would say to try to get some professional help, someone you could talk to, like I would any like that you would that no one who's going to belittle you. I would ask them about their spiritual life. I would probably tell them, some things they could do. For instance, you can sage. If they're coming to visit you in your home, you can sage. With the sweetgrass and stuff, you can visualize yourself in a protective bubble of light. But I would also get them to talk to someone because it's not even about answers, because there's no answer to that. You've had a bad experience. It doesn't make you a bad person. I would also say, what was bad? I'll give an example. I'll use my own example. But in answer to your question, I meet them at their map of the world. I don't promise anything I can't do. Sometimes just listening is healing. But I would ask them about their spiritual life. Are there ways they could protect themselves? There are protective stones you can wear, so they don't feel like a victim. But I'll give you an example. I had an incident where when the Greys came, they would never talk, but they would show pictures in my head. If they did talk, their mouths didn't move, so it was more like telepathy. One night, because when they started coming, they would paralyze me, and they showed me a picture of a syringe. And before I knew it, I had the most excruciating pain in the back of my head, where the back of my neck meets the stem of the brain. They put the needle there. I mean, I yelped. It was terrible. Now, when I told someone that and they didn't let me finish, they immediately demonized the ETs. And I got it. I get what they're saying. They said, well, you didn't ask for that. But anyway, so I talked to an astrologer friend of mine who said, you need to set some boundaries. Talk to them. They're around you. Tell them, we got to set some boundaries about this. This is out of hand. I mean, that you're hurting me. Anyway, I felt like a fool. But one night when I went home and my girlfriend at the time was out, I talked to them. I said, this is unacceptable. I mean, you're hurting me. I mean, what is it? About 10 days later, I had a visit. The paralysis. They showed me a picture of a syringe, and I felt the tiniest little pinprick in the crown chakra of my head. I mean, you could barely feel it. It's like when someone takes blood and you don't even feel it. When a nurse does that. And I took that as they listened to me. They listened to me.
Do you think that people that have negative experiences confuse that or connect that with a demonic experience?
I think they can. I mean, Bud Hopkins and I used to have. Bud had a group, the space group that you read about in my bio. Most of the people in that group had positive experiences or interpreted them as positive experience. In Bud's group, there were mostly people who have had, anal probes and things placed in. I mean, just stuff that I couldn't imagine. And so we had that. We were trying to say, look, all of them are not bad people or what have you, but how can you argue that to someone who's had that experience?
Some
So
have
there's always
suggested.
that running thing going on about who, I have to believe them if that was going on. You can't tell them, oh, come on now, just change your attitude. No, sometimes people have had terrible experiences, but I don't say that all ETs are terrible. It's like saying if you had a bad experience with reptilians, all the reptilians are bad people. They look like demons. They're alligators. And all the blonde, blue-eyed uh, star people, well, they're all sweetness and light. That's simply not true.
Some have suggested that some of the well-known hypnotherapists that would put people under to talk about their missing time had an unconscious influence on some of the people. So certain people, Hopkins or whatever, might attract or interpret some of these experiences in more of a negative or positive way, depending on the individual.
Well, there's certainly, hypnosis is not a perfect technique, but so far it seems to work, at least, I mean, depending on the skill. Bud was an excellent hypnotherapist um, because he regressed me a couple of times. But I think you just have to say, just like there some unconscious people, human beings on planet Earth, and there's some conscious people. There are many extraterrestrials who may not be as evolved spiritually. Many of them are, and we just have to take them by their experiences, as opposed to. And in this, I know you're not implying this, but as opposed to saying all the Greys are this, or all
Right.
the, yeah, all the Arcturians are this way. Yeah.
That makes sense. Brandi, I've kind of taken over here. Is there something else you wanted
Well,
to get into?
actually, I was just going to jump in with a
Okay.
question.
Oh, go ahead.
Since you mentioned that, you've mentioned that two different kinds of beings so far. You've mentioned that two different kinds of beings have visited you, Michael, and I wondered what was the significance of the specific kinds? I mean, why reptilians one time, why grays another time? Was it Were they each sort of projecting a different attitude, or why do you think two different
Yeah,
kinds of
I don't know. That's the honest answer. I mean, I've seen Greys, Arcturians, reptilians, Nordic people. I even saw a praying mantis last summer.
Oh my
What
God.
was interesting, a psychic told me, you're going to see a praying mantis in 3 days. And I see praying mantis people around you. I had never seen a praying mantis live. And 3 days later, I did. I have no idea why that is. People ask me, why do they come to you? I have no idea. An excellent psychic friend of mine who has since, crossed over told me that, and this was just with the Greys at that time, because that's all who was visiting me that I knew of. He said that I was with them in a past life, and so there. I didn't remember that, but they remembered that, and so there was a more familiarity. I found that could have been true. I mean, I'll put it like this: there were years that went by sometimes when I would not have a contact. I mean, I may have a dream about them, or I may meditate and see them, but sometimes years would go by before I would see one in my room or something like that, and I started to miss them. Even though I was losing sleep and I was afraid to turn the light. It took me 12, 15 years to be able to turn the light off in my room, as if keeping my bedroom light on would keep them away. But it was kind of post-traumatic stress. But when they stopped coming for a while, I yearned for them.
And what about? Could you talk a little bit about angels? We've heard stories of people, an individual or a group of people are in dire straits. A mysterious stranger shows up, and this person helps them out of their difficulty, and then they look around and they're not there anymore. Just very briefly, a lady told me a story like that where these people intervened, but they didn't look like we would think angels would. They were dressed in like Men in Black. They had dark suits and black fedoras. They drove a black car, and the dashboard was all lit up with lights and so forth. And they saved this couple from a bad situation, but very much like a classic angelic experience. How do you look at all this with ET and the tradition of angels?
Well, the specificity of what you just mentioned, what can you do? If someone says I saw people in black, that's it. I took the route of wherever you saw the word angel in the Bible, it would probably meant if you put star person there, it made more sense. Interestingly enough, in the Bible, nowhere does it say that the angels have wings. I believe our ancestors drew the wings to let us know that these beings could fly. But certainly there's more life out there. I mean, everyone that has visited me, I can't always say was a star person. Some people may have been spirits or just other life forms. So I think it's a very real phenomenon. I mean, I have seen people, these two people that I'm talking about had nothing to do with anything what you're just saying. I remember I was in New York City and it was early in the morning. I forgot where I was going. And there was a homeless man sitting on a curb. And I must have been daydreaming because when I crossed the street, I must have had a pensive look on my face. He said, "Come on, brother, is it that bad?" And I looked at him and I said, "Oh, thanks for waking me up. I don't know what I was doing." And I went over to him and I put some money in his cup. I took 3 steps and I turned around and he wasn't there. He was not there.
Wow.
It happened to me, and this was early in the morning, so it wasn't like the crowded New York street. It happened to me again on 42nd and 6th, right down the street, 42nd and 5th, right down the street from the library. Another homeless guy, it was cold. I went over to him, and he smiled at me, and we kind of joked a little bit, put $5 in his cup. Again, I took maybe 3 or 4 steps just to wave and say, "You take care of yourself," and he was gone. There's no way either of them could have gotten up and walked away that quickly. Now, were they angels? Who knows? But what they did was they brought me out of myself.
Truly a message. That they were truly messengers from a higher.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Brandi, did you want to? We're starting to get a little bit close to the end here. Is there anything else you wanted to get in? We're not right up against the clock, but if you wanted to get some more things in, go ahead.
Well, I guess I kind of wondered if you could talk about maybe how all of this helps you to, especially with your experiences, to let go of fear that might hold you back and keep you from fulfilling your potential. How do you release that fear or let go of it that most people just have in their daily life?
Well, it's a great question, Brandi. I got to say this. It wasn't so much that I released it. I live a much less fearful life. That I can tell you. And, fear of the unknown, fear of new experiences, fear of other people. What it helped me to do was to be aware of the fear. Well, Michael, you're responding to this out of fear. I'll give an example. I won't go too much into it. I just started dating someone I really, really like. And there was some behavior on both our parts, but I can speak to myself, where I was reacting from fear because I thought it was going to end up like another relationship I was in. And that wasn't fair to this individual because I just met them. And the fear was there, but I'm awake enough now that I could monitor myself and say, hey, what's really going on here? Is this about them or is this really about you? And so again, it just wasn't from the ET experiences, granted, but like I say, I have a meditation practice, I have a prayer life, I spend time alone, and I read and I study, and all those things help me become more self-aware. So I wouldn't say that I've relinquished fear in some areas of my life, but I'm aware of it now. Fear of
Okay.
success, fear of being all I can be. Where do I self sabotage myself? Because sometimes I do.
Yeah,
And I'm
isn't that
aware of it now. And whereas other times I had no idea. Either I would blame someone else or I'd just be oblivious to it.
Yeah, isn't that strange? I remember reading about in the old Napoleon Hill books and those books about a fear of success, and you think, why would anybody be afraid of succeeding? But you're right. We do tend to sabotage ourselves or fill our heads with all kinds of self doubt and so forth.
Yeah, because whether it's success or failure, it means change. And what human beings, what's the old saying? No one likes change but a wet baby. We do not like change. Nobody likes change.
Brandy. One thing we have to find out about is how Michael he was either called to ancient aliens, or
Yeah.
maybe he went to them and said, "Hey, look, I've got a message." So what? How did that
Oh
start,
my
Michael?
God, Steve. Well, okay,
Yes.
this is what happened.
This is what people want to know, Michael. They're saying, "Why don't you get to the ancient aliens? You're talking about all the other stuff. We got to talk about ancient
This is
aliens."
what happened. I was working as a diversity director at a hospital here. And literally, this is what happened. I've written a book. It's a short book. All of them could use an editor, but Amazon is selling them now. All is well. But I got a call. I forget the producer's name, but literally, I was in my office at the hospital, and I got a call. I forget his name because they change producers there, like you change shirts. And this guy said, "Is Reverend Michael Carter there?" I said, "Yes." And he said, "This is so and so from Prometheus Productions here in Hollywood, and I have your book here. And I'm very interested in what you have to say. Would you like to come on our show?" That's
Oh
how
my
it happened.
gosh. Wow.
Wow.
And they wanted me to fly out to LA. And I said, "Listen, I'm on the East Coast. I know you got studios in New York." And he said, "Well, is New York easier for you?" I said, "Yeah." So we shot in New York, and then I got the book went up on Amazon's #1 list for UFOs, books on UFOs. That was in 2014, and then I started doing Contact in the Desert. I started getting some energy behind the message, and then several years went by, and just last year, may have been last September, October, or was it December? Anyway, no, it was last summer. I got a call after, what is it, 2019, last year. So after 4 years, I got a call, a different producer. They flew me out to LA. They're not shooting in New York. And I went out there. It was a long flight. I got out there that night, went to dinner, shot the next day, and I was back. I caught a red eye bat. And one of the shows is already airing. It's on the Pleiades.
Oh,
The
yes.
other
Okay.
episodes are going to be in the fall. They told me they were going to show them in March or April. A friend of mine called me last month and said, "I just saw a new episode of you on Ancient Aliens." And I said, "Oh, great." And then when I called to get the dates of the other ones, I was told that they're pushing them up till the fall. So in the fall, there'll be some new episodes, but there's one episode that's probably out there now on the Pleiades. I did an episode on the books that were taken out of the Bible
Mm-hmm.
that may have had ET influence. It's called Forbidden Texts. And I also do some episodic stuff on UFOs, the hidden evidence. That is airing on the Travel Channel. It was on the American Military Channel at one point, which I thought was an interesting channel. But now and they fly me to Austin, Texas. And you can probably buy those or look at them. I don't have them all. Friends see them and they send them to me on a CD. But the next episodes of Ancient Aliens will be in the fall.
Well, that's great that they've had you back again.
Yeah. I've had a great time.
How do you feel about you like you say you get these they have these little quick sound bites, so
yeah.
you've got to be on your game and got to know exactly what you're going to say and be concise. And so what's that like? That must be kind of challenging and fun at the same time.
What they do is that because you're shooting for 2-3 hours and then you see yourself on for 3 minutes, but then you know how they edit it up for different shows.
Oh sure.
Yeah. They give you they tell you what they want you to talk about. And you gotta research it. Sometimes they'll give you some clues, but you've got to get online and research it and read and study. And when you get there, they're asking you the questions, and you've got to now. I mean, you cut and paste and all that, but it is stressful, especially coming because I flew 3,000 miles. I got there that night. Early evening, and then I found out that one of the producers gave me 8 more questions to add on to it, and so it was stressful. So I went to bed. I studied that night. I went to bed, and then I woke up that morning early and studied some more, and they took me to the set.
Wow.
Yeah, Randy and I have some friends, like Chad is one, that wrote the Van Meter Visitor,
Yes.
Chad Lewis. And yeah, we see him. Chad is so good. He's so animated, and he really will grab you. So I always wondered what that would be like. I've actually done several interviews that have never aired anywhere, Michael. So my ship has not quite come in yet. But it could. One day you might see my smiling face and a little soundbite and say, I know that guy.
Well, let me tell you, it sounds sexier than it is. I mean, you don't get paid a lot of money. I mean, not unless you're like Eric Van Donigan or.
Oh, sure.
So, but they give you a stipend. They fly you out. They pay for your meals. They'll get you a ride to and from the airport, and that's it. But for me, usually my sales go up if people see the show.
Oh, sure. Yeah, that's all good.
Yeah.
And did you ever get to hang out with any of the other, shall we say, ancient alien celebrities?
When I did a talk at the Edgar Casey place in Virginia Beach, so I got to hang out with Eric. We got drunk together.
Oh my God.
And I got to tell
That's
you,
great.
he can put it away. Eric was there. Giorgio, I'm not friendly with him, but we talked at times because he was at the Contact in the Desert in 2014. Plus, he was at the Edgar Casey Foundation. Yeah, you get to talk to them, and they're basically a nice group of people.
It sounds
And
like
everybody gets along? You think they all?
Now, I can't say that. No, not that I know anything different, but they're all people and their egos involved or whatever. But I would assume they do. You have to a certain degree, else you can't be on the show, because
Right.
they're not going to have someone there who's going to be trouble, or But everybody seems to gel really nicely.
Well, they could be missing the boat. Maybe they should have a segment where you and Von Daniken just get drunk together and have a conversation. That would be.
Let me tell you, it was so much fun. It was so much fun, and we put away a lot of wine. That day. Wow,
That's great.
I mean, I left. I had to leave, and he was still there.
Oh my gosh.
I had to go back to my room. I was done. Yeah, I was done. He's a really nice man.
That he seems that way, and like I said before, he's a survivor. He's
Yeah.
and who was it? Velikovsky. was severely attacked, and people would actually lie about. I mean, his ideas were controversial, as von Daniken's was, but some of the skeptics would actually make up stuff that he said that he didn't. So it gets pretty nasty. So I just think it's great that Eric von Daniken is a survivor, and he's so well revered.
Yes, it's well deserved.
And Brandi, I have one more question, but do you have any last thoughts, any last questions you'd like to present to Michael?
No, please go ahead.
Okay. I'm just curious, Michael, what do you see for the future? I mean, we have this, it's sort of a great awakening, really, with UFOs and ETs. People have all kinds of different ideas, all kinds of different claims. What do you see for humanity's future? You've got a very, I should tell people that I have perused your books on Kindle, and you have a very, very positive message here, and well worth checking out.
Yeah,
so how do you see the future?
I feel I'm hopeful about the future, not naive, and it can go either way, but I think that probably in our lifetimes we may hear that we're not alone. I mean, most people know that on some level. Shows like Ancient Aliens, even if people don't believe it, it's getting people talking. I do see an awakening. I see it now through this coronavirus, how people are taking care of one another. Yes, there's a fear, but there's always going to be that. Always. Because there are 8 billion people on the planet, 350 million people in the United States. All of us don't react to challenge and crises the same way. I feel that it's going to be painful for some of us, but there is going to be a new world where there's less. I mean, we're seeing it now. Who's really essential? Are athletics, are athletes really essential? We could argue some of our politicians, are they really essential? But we're seeing without just the everyday people who clean for us or work at the shopping mall or help feed us, that we can't, we collapse without that. So that's a shift in consciousness. And sometimes it will take something like this to pull it together. So, yes, there's one of my favorite philosophers and a minister, Dr. Howard Thurman. He was a mentor to Dr. King. And he said this. He said, the contradictions of life are not final. Here we are in Holy Week, here in this country. Good Friday comes before Easter. Sometimes you got to go through a lot of stuff before you can be rejuvenated and renewed and new life. So I think the symbolism of this week and what we're going through now, if we really let it in, it could transform us. It could change us. But we have to be willing to pay the price of the ticket.
You're right. There's a lot of positive things going on right now, and it's really good if we can focus on some of those things. And
yes,
that will certainly take away some of the fear.
Yes.
Michael, please tell us where we can find you and about your books.
Okay. First of all, Brandi and Steve, it's just been wonderful. And I'd like to do it again another time. Or maybe we could go through the Bible.
We
could go through
will.
the Old and New Testament.
Oh, no problem.
Yeah,
we'll do it again.
Yeah, we have to. I'm enjoying this. My books can be found on Amazon. You can go to my website, which is reverendmichaeljscarter.com. I will respond. Or you can go to my email, which is michaeljscarter@gmail.com. And so you can get me a Gmail. You can go to reverendmichaeljscarter.com, and you can go to Amazon for the books. Keep tuning in. Don't let fear take the day. It's running rampant in the streets right now, but we can raise the vibration by keeping centered and just being who we are and having a little more compassion and love towards each other.
Michael, this has been such a pleasure to have you on today. I really appreciate it. And Brandi, it's been so nice to have you here, being a fan as you are, and been on the ground floor of Ancient Aliens back when I was a snob.
Well, thank you so much for inviting me. It's been my honor.
It's been wonderful, Brandi. wishing you all, you both, a long and happy life. Don't get sick.
So if everybody will sit tight, I'll do my quick closeout here, and just sit tight for a moment. The High Strangeness Factor was created by Steve Ward and Andy Mercer and is copyrighted on the Paranormal UK Radio Network. I want to thank Irene Allen Block and Mark Johnson, who are, of course, our fearless leaders here at the network. I want to thank Andy Mercer, who produces the show and makes it sound as good as it possibly can. I also want to thank Brian Zeller, who has composed the great music for the High Strangeness Factor. And he also acts as my unofficial ombudsman sometimes, whether I ask for it or not. And I want to thank Mark Eddy for helping to make this show possible. And I am Steve Ward, your humble host here on the High Strangeness Factor, a displaced Yank here on Paranormal UK Radio. Thank you for listening. I will see you all again in a fortnight. Take care.